In 1907, a young man walked into an art school in Vienna with a simple dream. He wanted to become an artist, but within hours, that dream was destroyed. He was rejected. To the people inside that building, it seemed like an ordinary decision, just another applicant who wasn't good enough. But they were wrong, because the young man they turned away would not disappear into history. Years later, millions would follow him. Entire nations would fear him, and his decisions would help ignite the deadliest war the world had ever seen. But none of that had happened yet. At this moment, he was just a struggling young man with no money, no future, and no idea what lay ahead. So how did a failed artist become one of the most powerful men in history? How did rejection turn into ambition? And how did ambition turn into a movement that changed the world forever? This is the story of Adolf Hitler before the world knew his name. Long before the world knew his name, Adolf Hitler was just a young boy with a dream. He wasn't dreaming of power. He wasn't dreaming of war. He wanted to become an artist. Born in Austria in 1889, Hitler grew up in a household divided by two very different parents. His father, Alois Hitler, was a strict man who believed his son should follow a stable government career. But Adolf had no interest in office work. While other boys thought about ordinary jobs, he spent his time drawing buildings, sketching landscapes, and imagining a future filled with art. The more he dreamed about becoming an artist, the more his father opposed him. Arguments became common. Neither side was willing to give in. To Adolf, becoming an artist wasn't just a hobby, it was his future. Then, in 1903, everything changed. His father died unexpectedly. For the first time in his life, nobody was standing between him and his dream. Now he was free. Free to leave the past behind. Free to chase the future he had imagined for years. As he grew older, one city captured his attention more than any other: Vienna. To young artists across Europe, Vienna was a city of opportunity, a place where talent could become success, a place where dreams could become reality. Hitler became obsessed with the idea. He filled notebooks with sketches and convinced himself that his future was waiting there. In his mind, the journey was already over. He would move to Vienna, he would enter art school, and he would become a successful artist. Everything seemed planned. Everything seemed possible. But history often changes because of a single moment. And Hitler was about to face one of those moments. With hope in his heart and confidence in his talent, he packed his drawings and set his sights on Vienna. He believed he was traveling toward his future. He had no idea he was traveling toward the rejection that would change his life forever. In 1907, Adolf Hitler finally arrived in Vienna. This was the moment he had been dreaming about for years. He carried his sketches, his ambition, and the belief that he was destined to become an artist. In his mind, success was only one step away. All he had to do was get accepted into the Vienna Academy of Fine Arts. Confident and hopeful, Hitler submitted his work and waited for the results. Then came the answer. He had been rejected. The Academy's professors believed he lacked the talent needed for painting. Some even suggested that his skills were better suited for architecture rather than fine art. For Hitler, the rejection was devastating. The future he had imagined suddenly disappeared. The dream that had driven him for years had collapsed in a single moment. But the worst part was yet to come. Hitler refused to give up. Convinced that a mistake had been made, he returned the following year and applied again. This time, he was even more confident. This time, he believed things would be different. They weren't. He was rejected again. 2 attempts, 2 failures, 2 doors slammed shut. For most people, this would have been the end of the story. But for Hitler, it was the beginning of something far darker. With no art school, no career, and no clear future, he remained in Vienna. His savings slowly disappeared. The young man who had arrived with big dreams now found himself struggling to survive. Some nights, he slept in cheap shelters. Some days, he sold small paintings just to earn enough money for food. The city he once believed would make him successful had become a place of disappointment and hardship. Yet during these difficult years, something inside him began to change. The hopeful young artist was slowly being replaced by a bitter and frustrated man. Every failure deepened his anger. Every setback strengthened his resentment. And while he spent his days trying to survive, he also spent countless hours observing the political and social tensions around him. Without realizing it, Vienna was shaping the man he would eventually become. Years later, the world would remember Adolf Hitler as a dictator. But in 1908, he was simply a failed artist wandering the streets of Vienna, searching for a future that no longer existed. And soon, another event would arrive, an event that would give his life a completely new direction. World War I. By 1913, Adolf Hitler had little to show for the dreams he once carried to Vienna. The art schools had rejected him, his money was gone, and the future he had imagined for himself had completely fallen apart. Then, just 1 year later, Europe changed forever. In 1914, World War I erupted. Across the continent, millions of young men rushed to join the military. Like many others, Hitler saw the war as an opportunity to find purpose, belonging, and meaning in his life. For the first time in years, he felt that he was part of something bigger than himself. He joined the German army and was sent to the front lines, where the reality of war quickly replaced the excitement that many young soldiers had felt at the beginning. The trenches were brutal, mud filled the ground, artillery shook the earth, death was everywhere. Every day, soldiers watched friends disappear in explosions or fall under enemy fire. Yet unlike many others, Hitler adapted to military life surprisingly well. He served as a messenger, carrying information between units under extremely dangerous conditions. The job often required him to move through areas exposed to enemy attacks, where a single mistake could mean death. For his service, he received several military decorations and earned a reputation as a disciplined and loyal soldier. For the first time in his life, he felt respected. For the first time, he felt he truly belonged somewhere. Then came 1918. After 4 years of fighting, Germany was defeated. The empire collapsed. The Kaiser stepped down, and millions of soldiers returned home to a country they barely recognized. Hitler was shocked. Like many Germans, he struggled to understand how the nation had lost the war. The defeat filled him with anger and disbelief. Everything he had sacrificed suddenly felt meaningless. But unlike most soldiers, Hitler did not return home and move on with his life. Instead, he became obsessed with understanding what had happened to Germany. And while millions focused on rebuilding their futures, Hitler focused on something else: politics. Without realizing it, the failed artist who had found purpose in war was about to discover a new battlefield, one that would prove far more dangerous than anything he had faced in the trenches. When the war ended, Adolf Hitler found himself standing at a crossroads. For most soldiers, the war was over. They returned home, searched for work, and tried to rebuild their lives. But Hitler had nothing to return to. No career, no family of his own, no clear future. The army had given him purpose, and now that purpose was gone. Meanwhile, Germany was falling apart. The streets were filled with angry veterans, struggling workers, and frustrated citizens who blamed the government for the country's defeat. Political groups were appearing everywhere, each promising a different solution to Germany's problems. It was a time of chaos, and chaos creates opportunity. In 1919, Hitler was assigned by the army to observe small political groups and report on their activities. One day, he attended a meeting of a little-known organization called the German Workers' Party. At first, it seemed insignificant, just a handful of people discussing politics in a small room. But something happened that night. During a debate, Hitler spoke passionately and aggressively against one of the speakers. His words caught everyone's attention. For the first time, people listened. For the first time, people applauded. For the first time, Hitler discovered something he had never truly realized before. He had a gift. He could influence a crowd. The leaders of the party were impressed and soon invited him to join. Hitler accepted. At the time, nobody could have imagined what would come next. The party was tiny. It had little money, very few supporters, and almost no influence. But Hitler saw potential where others saw weakness. As the months passed, he became one of its most active members. His speeches attracted larger audiences. People came to hear him speak about Germany's defeat, national pride, and the future of the country. Every speech brought more supporters. Every rally brought more attention. Slowly, the small political group began to grow, and so did Hitler's ambitions. The failed artist who once dreamed of painting buildings was no longer chasing a career in art. He was chasing power. And before long, he would transform a forgotten political party into a movement that would shake Germany and eventually the entire world. By the early 1920s, Adolf Hitler was no longer just another member of a small political party. He had become its most powerful voice. Wherever he spoke, crowds gathered. People came to hear the man who promised to restore Germany's pride and undo the humiliation of Versailles. His speeches were emotional, aggressive, and unforgettable. Many left inspired, others left worried, but almost nobody left without an opinion. As his popularity grew, the German Workers' Party changed as well. It adopted a new name, the National Socialist German Workers' Party, better known as the Nazi Party. Hitler's influence inside the movement continued to expand. Soon he wasn't following the party was following him. But Hitler wanted more than supporters. He wanted power. In 1923, believing the government was weak and Germany was ready for change, Hitler attempted to seize control through a coup in Munich. Surrounded by supporters, he hoped to launch a revolution that would spread across the country. It failed. The authorities quickly crushed the uprising. Several people were killed. Hitler was arrested. For many politicians, this would have been the end. But once again, Hitler turned failure into opportunity. During his trial, he used the courtroom as a stage. Instead of defending himself quietly, he delivered speeches that attracted national attention. Newspapers across Germany reported his words, and millions who had never heard of him before suddenly knew his name. Although he was found guilty, the trial made him famous. Hitler was sent to prison. Yet even there, his story was far from over. While serving his sentence, he wrote a book called Mein Kampf, outlining his political ideas and his vision for Germany's future. Most people ignored it. Few believed the man sitting in prison would ever become important. They were wrong. When Hitler was released, he returned to politics with a new strategy. He would no longer try to seize power by force. Instead, he would use speeches, elections, and public support. And over the next few years, that strategy would bring him closer to power than ever before. The failed artist had become a political force, and Germany was about to listen. For years, Adolf Hitler had been dismissed as a failure, a failed student, a failed artist, a failed revolutionary. Yet every setback seemed to make him stronger. The rejection in Vienna had not stopped him. The hardships of poverty had not stopped him. Even prison had not stopped him. Instead, each failure pushed him closer to a new goal: power. By the late 1920s, Germany was once again facing uncertainty. Economic troubles were returning, public anger was growing, and millions of people were losing faith in the leaders who promised solutions. And Hitler was ready. He had spent years building his movement, refining his message, and preparing for the opportunity he believed would come. Now that opportunity was approaching. The failed artist who once wandered the streets of Vienna with no money and no future was becoming one of the most recognizable political figures in Germany. But his greatest rise was still ahead. In the next episode, we'll uncover how Adolf Hitler transformed from a political outsider into the leader of Germany. How did he win the support of millions? How did the Nazi Party become one of the most powerful movements in Europe? And how did Germany hand its future to a man many once considered a failure? The answers lie in the next chapter, and that chapter would change the world forever.